Britannia,
the podcast where two Aussies teach Brits their own history. This is my friend Ellie.
and this is my friend Claire. And every fortnight we'll give you a brief history lesson in everything from Alfred the Great to zebras in the London Zoo. We're not historians, just know-it-alls with a keen interest in the history of the motherland. So Claire, what will you be teaching us today?
Well, I'm going to talk to you about Hadrian's Wall.
Oh my god!
Yep. So I have been to Hadrian's Wall. Have you been?
No, I've never been. What is it like?
Well, I went to visit Carlisle, only to discover there's not a lot in Carlisle.
Uh-huh. Okay.
Which people from Carlisle will be the first to tell you, so I feel like I'm allowed to say it as well. So we decided to go and walk the wall, which you can do.
Walk the wall. Do you walk along the wall?
Yes, so there's a nice little track along the wall.
Cool.
I had food poisoning
God.
from a real dodgy Pret sandwich.
Oh.
So whilst I enjoyed the views immensely and the nature surrounding the wall, didn't learn a lot about the wall.
Decided to focused on
not vomiting. So decided to read up on the wall and discovered many things I had thought I knew about it were wrong.
Right, okay.
Things I thought I knew about it from being there. So,
Really?
Yeah. I was not paying attention. So here it is, Hadrian's Wall. In Latin, velum aleum. I'm just going to assume I'm pronouncing that wrong. Though an inscription on a pan that they discovered in 2003 suggests that it was actually called velum alei.
Ooh.
Aleus being a Hadrian family name.
Oh, okay.
So we call it Hadrian's Wall because he built it, but that's what it was called at the time.
Right.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Huh.
So starting in AD 122, during the reign of Emperor Hadrian, it was built over 6 years.
Oh, that's quick.
He did not build it himself physically. He ordered the building of it.
Lazy.
I know. These emperors just sitting around in their togas.
Eating grapes.
Getting fanned.
Fiddling while...
Rome
No, that's Rome.
burns.
Is that right? Yeah.
Nero did that, apparently.
Cool. Fab.
But I assume he had a lot of fiddle lessons in the build-up to it. Yeah. Didn't build a single wall. It's basically a long wall.
Uh-huh.
It's technically a defense fortification made up of a bunch of stuff that colloquially is called a wall.
Okay.
It is 117.5 kilometres long.
Whoa.
Which I'll tell you what it is in miles, but if you still go by miles, it just disappoints
Get
me.
over it.
Yeah, 73 miles long.
Cool.
I,
Means nothing to me.
Exactly.
No idea.
Empty measurements. So Britain was permanently conquisted.
Conquisted?
Conquistadors. Britain was
Conquered?
Britain was permanently conquered around AD 43.
Okay.
So
Permanently conquered.
Well, Rome had sort of, been like poking at it for a while, and that's when it had been completely quote unquote subdued.
Right, okay.
Yeah, so then they kind of made their way north. And
And then they met the Scots?
well, I'm going to get to that because it's not, that's what I always had been told was they had to keep out the crazy Scots, but it's not quite as simple as that.
Okay.
Yeah. So the wall itself is built of stone, which turns out there's a lot of these kind of Roman walls around. They're not all built of stone.
Really? What are they built of?
Earth and stone. There's a lot of stone, but this one is all stone. Like it's a stone base and a stone wall.
Okay.
So they really put a lot of effort into this. And there is a fort every 5 Roman miles. So if you thought like imperial miles were stupid, Roman miles are even weirder. Also called a mille passus, which literally means 1,000 paces.
Wow.
It consisted of 1,000 paces as measured by every other step, as in the total distance of the left foot hitting the ground 1,000 times.
Huh.
It was quite, it was a really arbitrary measurement, and they eventually kind of like made it more codified. But that was,
I kind of get that. It's like a full round of breath, in, out, left, right, kind of ish.
Still real arbitrary.
Yeah.
Just a real big fan of
kilometers.
Yeah. So there's a fort every 5 Roman miles.
Okay.
I don't know what that translates to in kilometers though. And then there were miller castles, which is just a little fort that's every mile. Yeah.
That's cute.
Tiny forts. And then in between each miller castle were 2 turrets. So it it wasn't straight wall. It was like lots of little defense fortifications along the way. So from north to south, so not the long bit of the wall, like if you cut the wall in half like a cake.
Yeah.
The wall comprised of a ditch, then the actual stone wall bit, a military way, which is just a Roman road, and then a vallum, which is an earthen rampart. It's like a huge earthwork associated with this wall specifically.
Right.
Like it's unique to any other Roman wall. And it runs like practically from coast to coast to the south of the wall, this vallum thing.
Wow.
It's just this huge lump of dirt.
Yeah.
And then there's another ditch with more mounds of things.
Great.
So all of that just built up to this one big defense system that altogether was called the wall.
It sounds really formidable.
Yeah, I mean, when you see it, you kind of just see what looks like a really basic wall that you would see in any field.
Okay.
It's sort of like
a farm wall.
Yeah, like waist high, made of a pile of stones. You're like, cool, a wall. But it is a lot more engineering that went into the actual wall itself when it was first built.
Okay.
So in addition to the wall's defensive military role, its gates may have been customs posts so that anything going in and out could have been taxed.
Right.
Yes. It was not the northernmost barrier of the Roman Empire, as I had thought.
Right.
So that's what I had been told.
That's what I thought too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That honour belongs to the Antonine Wall, known to the Romans as Vallum Antonini. And that was a turf and stone fortification. It was actually a turf fortification on stone foundations.
And where was that?
Well, that was built by the Romans between what is now Glasgow and Edinburgh.
That makes so much sense.
Yeah.
Because I was in Glasgow once and they have a Roman bath there.
There you go.
And I got so confused because I thought that
Hadrian's Wall had been where they stopped. No, they did. Yeah, they went that far north.
Solving mysteries,
Yeah,
Claire.
that's what I'm here to do. And that was built in AD 142. So it was only 20 years later that they started building this wall even further north.
Okay.
Yeah. At the order of Emperor Antoninus Pius. He never visited Britain, whereas Hadrian did. So he ordered this wall that's named after him, and Hadrian ordered his wall, but Hadrian at least visited his wall.
That's something.
Yeah.
Do you think Donald Trump will visit his wall?
God. Probably will. And he'll probably like break a bottle of champagne over it.
God.
And we'll all hate him forever, as we already do. So Antoninus was unable to conquer the northern tribes.
Because they were scary.
Yeah. I think they all just, I'm betting the Romans got real cold.
Oh,
it's chilly up here.
It is.
So when Marcus Aurelius became emperor, he abandoned the Antonine Wall and reoccupied Hadrian's Wall as the main defensive barrier in 164 AD. So it was like they built the wall in 122. 20 years later, they built this wall much further north. Then another 20 years later, they were just like, nah, too hard. Fell back to Hadrian's Wall.
Okay.
So I think that's why the Antonine Wall isn't as well known.
Right.
Because it was only occupied for about 20 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Another thing I had wrong about Hadrian's Wall is that it does not, and never has, marked the boundary between England and Scotland.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it lies entirely within England. At some points, it is 109 kilometres from the Scottish border.
Wow.
Although at its closest, it is 1 kilometre away.
Okay.
So, like, I see where the idea comes from. But
Yeah.
yeah, I, in my mind, was like, yeah, that's basically the border. It's just pretty much Hadrian's Wall. Like, I figured it wasn't exactly it, but turns out it has never been used as a border mark at all.
Right.
Yeah. So why a wall?
Yeah.
Apparently not to keep out these hordes of
Scary Scottish
people. According to a restored sandstone fragment found in Jarrow, which is a town in England, which dates from about 118 or 119 AD, it was Hadrian's wish to keep intact the empire, which had been imposed on him via divine instruction. That's kind of all it had to say.
Odd.
Yeah, basically he was trying to keep the empire whole. And he felt like that was
that was the limit of the empire.
Was like, this is it.
That's where it ends.
Yeah, I think he didn't want to like overreach and have...
Sounds like he was trying to find an excuse to not have to come to Scotland.
Just being lazy.
Was there ever a southern wall or no?
There was lots of walls in lots of different places.
Okay.
Yeah. At different various edges of the...
Bits
there was one in Germany. There was,
wow, cool.
They were around. This is... but as I said, it was unique for its earthen ramparts.
Good old earthen ramparts.
Oh, yeah.
Gotta have them.
Yeah. Hadrian's biographer did write, though, that Hadrian was the first to build a wall 80 miles long to separate the Romans from the barbarians. Reasons for the constructions of the wall vary, and no record of an exact explanation survive. And scholars constantly bicker over exactly what reason he had for building it.
Right.
There's no central theory, no evidence of any specific thing. Most theories presented by historians think it's an expression of Roman power and Hadrian's policy of defense before expansion.
Okay.
So he wasn't so much interested in making empire bigger as he was just defending what he already had.
Right, like shore it up before you try and...
Yeah.
Okay.
Because scholars disagree over how much of a threat the inhabitants of northern Britain actually presented.
Right.
And whether there was any economic advantage in defending and garrisoning a fixed line of defences like a wall, rather than just conquering and annexing what had become the Scottish, like what would become the Scottish lowlands.
Okay.
And defending that territory with just like a bunch of forts instead.
Yeah,
Because like a wall is a big thing to defend and maintain constantly. So it would have just been easier to have a few forts around.
Yeah.
Because the lowlands weren't hugely populated at that point anyway.
Okay. All right.
So they're not really sure
why you would... Yeah, right.
It was a big investment. So, yeah.
That tariff, like the tax sort of...
Yes. Well,
like
that's like another possible explanation is that it would have provided a large degree of control over immigration, smuggling, and customs. Walls like this often didn't strictly mark the boundaries of the empire. So, like, Roman power and influence would have extended beyond the control. They would have been trading with people who lived outside the wall.
Yeah.
Goods would have been coming in from lots of other places.
Yeah.
So the wall would have been there to control the flow of goods and make sure everything was taxed properly.
Right.
We all know people like money, so capitalism. That's the reason for the wall. Yeah. So lots of people lived there from all over Rome, including people from modern-day Syria, Romania, and northern Africa.
Along the wall?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, so Roman garrisons came from all over to occupy the forts.
Amazing.
Yeah, and as far as we can tell, it continued until the end of Roman Britain. It was occupied into the early 5th century.
Whoa.
Yeah, so the last coins found on Hadrian's Wall were minted in AD 403 to 406.
Whoa.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
Yeah. So long sections of the wall were torn down in the 18th century for road building.
Fair enough.
Especially by one General Wade, who used it to build a military road. And that road was used to move troops to crush the Jacobite insurrection. Which we may talk about in the future. But
wow.
Yeah, so...
That's sort of full circle. Like, if it ever was used to defend England against the Scots, then... Wow.
Yeah.
Brutal.
So large parts of it still stand today, which I can personally attest to. And it can be walked along. You can walk all the way across the whole thing.
Whoa.
Yeah. It's a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and it is the largest Roman artifact in existence.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh my god, that's so cool.
I mean, you know, in
bigger
as much
than
as you
the
consider
Colosseum. And wow.
Largest single artifact.
That's so cool.
Yeah, because it consists of all these little forts all the way, and all that adds up to this huge volume of history. And it's just there, and you can just stroll along it, and they keep using it for filming sites. So if you've ever seen the 1991 Robin Hood Prince of Thieves, there's this little spot called the Sycamore Gap, which is this really big, there's just this dip between two hills that's really dramatic. And the wall is built completely along this like inverted bell curve. And there's a tree in the middle of it. And it's really iconic. There's lots of photos of it and things, but it's where there's a scene where like Robin is chatting to Morgan Freeman and it's filmed there.
Cool.
So yeah.
So it's around.
Yeah.
Still kicking.
Yep. Still there. Romans built good stuff.
Walls are such a thing, aren't they?
I know. We're really obsessed with dividing things up and creating barriers.
We do it all the time. So I just sort of, I don't know, like the Great Wall of China.
Yeah.
Did that work? I don't know.
No.
Not really?
No. Well, I mean, it worked in parts, and then there were other times when, like, it didn't work. The thing is, like, it's especially something like the Great Wall of China is a massive structure to maintain.
Yeah, and as you said, to keep, soldiered up.
Yeah.
It's like you need a lot of people, don't you?
Forts would have, like, thousands of soldiers in them, and then that needs all the people there to feed them.
Yeah,
and
supply lines and
stuff. So, it's a huge structure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was so interesting. Thank you so much.
Yeah, it just amazed me how much of it turned out to be completely
Not
different to what I had thought.
Yeah. Yeah,
so I'm glad I know the truth now.
Definitely thought that like marked the border as well, and that it had been used
specifically to keep out the, quote-unquote Scottish barbarians.
Yeah. Who were probably just chilling.
Yeah, they're
their own
like,
business.
we don't want to go past your wall, we're fine.
We've got whiskey, we've got neeps and tatties.
We've got haggis, we're set.
Which kind of neatly leads me onto my topic.
What are you going to tell me about?
So, my favourite holiday of the year is coming up.
Ooh.
Have you ever been to a Burns night supper, Claire?
I have not.
Have you never?
No, I've never done any.
Oh, they're super fun. So, when I first moved to Scotland, it was in January. And Burns Night, which is the night on which Scottish people all around the world celebrate the poet Robert Burns, is on the 25th of January, which is Robert Burns' birthday.
Oh, happy birthday, Robbie.
Oh, happy birthday. Rabbi, they call
Sorry,
him. Rabbi Burns. And on Burns Night, you basically say lots of poetry, you drink lots of whiskey, and you have haggis, which I know is a controversial delicacy. Neeps, which are turnips, all mashed up usually, and tatties, which are potatoes.
I would say turnips are equally controversial.
Really? Do you not like a turnip?
Who likes a turnip?
I like a turnip.
Oh, okay, well, shit. Already controversial here at this table.
But before I moved to Scotland, I didn't know about Burns Night.
Yeah, I'd never heard of it before until I moved here.
No. And I didn't really know much about Robert Burns, but I did know sort of snatches of things, I guess. Like, My Love is Like a Red, Red Rose is Robert Burns, and he also wrote Auld Lang Syne, which we sing at New Year's.
See, I knew the song, but I didn't know that he had written it.
No, me neither. But I did a little bit of research into Old Rabbi, who's considered to be, by most Scottish people, their national poet. So he was born in Ayrshire, which is sort of southwest of Edinburgh. Of Glasgow, really. It's like in the southwest bit of Scotland, towards the coast. But I'm
just trying to remember which way is west.
Oh.
Yeah, that was all.
Left?
Yeah.
Is that how you... So down there, he was the child of tenant farmers, which means farmers who didn't own their land. They rented their land and worked it, which is kind of a tough existence because you didn't get... I mean, if you own the land and you work it, I guess at least you get the benefits of, when you make a profit.
Yeah.
It's good. You make money if it's all going well. But tenant farmers had a pretty tough existence.
Bigger risk, but also bigger reward versus always having to pay someone back.
Exactly. So they were pretty poor. His family was quite poor. But his parents were really keen that their kids have a good education. So Rabbi went to school and was super smart and did well in all of his subjects.
Yeah, I mean, I always just assumed he was some, foppish rich guy who just went to uni and swanned around, yeah.
Oh, man, no. Yeah, no, he was a farmer, legit a farmer. So he worked on the farm most of his life. So he went to school and he read lots of books.
They make you do that there.
They do at school, it's true. And he read lots of literature and lots of poetry. And still, but while doing that, still working on the farm and doing the crops and stuff. And he started writing poetry when he was sort of in his early teens because he loved the ladies.
Oh, yeah.
And we all know that ladies love poetry.
We do.
We do.
I don't.
You don't?
But some ladies do.
Some ladies.
I have no objection to poetry, but if someone wrote me a poem, I'd have to be like, I can assume this is good, but I have no metric for measuring it against.
Sweeping generalizations about ladies liking poetry. But I think the ladies in Burns's time did like poetry because he was extremely successful and had many, many illegitimate children in Ayrshire.
Oh, God.
So many.
Is that the measure we're using for good poetry now?
I think it might be. Success at poetry in a time where you could not access contraception.
Oh, no.
So, yeah, he did quite well.
Don't play with poetry, kids. It's where it leads you to.
Dangerous. Use protection when you poetry. So he was, hanging out with the ladies. The ladies loved him. But he was also getting kind of political because this was at a time when Scotland had gone through some mega changes. So Burns was born in 1759.
Oh, okay.
Should have said that at the start.
Yeah, I was about to ask, but yeah.
1759, as we know, is just after Culloden, which was 1740.
Sure.
Culloden, was like mid-18th century.
Yeah.
We're just going to quickly look up that date for you so that we have a super accurate podcast that you can rely on for your history facts.
We don't want you to have to Google things
yourselves. So we'll do it for you. Don't worry. So while that information is coming to you...
1746.
Amazing. 1746. So he's born just about 10 years after Culloden. Culloden was when the English resoundingly beat the Scots, who had decided they were going to support an alternate king instead of...
Which was the Jacobite Rebellion. Before.
Yeah. So they wanted Bonnie Prince Charlie on the throne and not the guy who was already there at that time.
Yeah.
Yeah, that guy.
We know who that is.
And that was because Bonnie Prince Charlie was a Catholic and the guy who was King of England was Protestant. Anyway, we're not going to go into that now because obviously we're not brilliantly well informed. But
we haven't read the Wikipedia page.
We haven't read the Wikipedia. Not yet, but we will. So that had just happened, and that had been a bit of a blow to the Scottish clans. A lot of things were banned after Culloden, like the wearing of tartan and all sorts of things like that, Scottishy things. And before Culloden, there'd been they dissolved Scottish Parliament. So in 1707, Holyrood, which is where Scottish Parliament is held, was sort of folded into Westminster. So Scotland didn't have great political representation in the UK or Britain. And also they just lost this big battle where they lost a lot of their culture and heritage. So he's growing up at a time when Scotland's going through some stuff. And he started a debating society with some of his mates in Ayrshire to talk about the topics of the time. Also, like the French Revolution was bubbling. So, 1789, you've got La Prise de la Bastille. So stuff is happening in Europe. People are thinking about how we do politics and how we govern. And he was really interested in that and he wanted to talk about it. So that's cool. He was political and he was randy. It's a good combo. And he was great at poetry. So he's a farmer in Ayrshire and he's surrounded by nature and just total gorgeousness in the Scottish countryside. So he wrote some really, really special poems there. One of them, Tea Mouse, is one of my favourites. It's basically he was turning a field, whatever that is. He was doing stuff in a field and he came across a mouse. He disturbed a mouse's home. So he wrote this gorgeous poem called To a Mouse, which my friend Jane is going to read for you now.
Wee sleekit cowden timorous beastie, oh what a panic's in thy breastie. Thou needna start a wa sae hasty wi' bickering brattle. I would be laith to rin and chase thee wi' murdering pattle. I'm truly sorry man's dominion has broken nature's social union and justifies the ill opinion which makes thee startle at me, thy poor earth-born companion and fellow mortal.
So that was Tea Mouse.
That's beautiful.
It's a gorgeous poem. It's so lovely. I love it. It's so touching and so empathetic to another creature. It's beautiful, which sort of folds in his politics as well. He's, into equality and love amongst human and animal things on earth. Okay, so he's a farmer. He's in the country. He's getting all these girls pregnant. And farming is not lucrative, and he's got a lot of illegitimate...
Nor is getting lots of people pregnant.
Exactly. So he's
not that he was in any way responsible for the financial upbringing of those children.
Well, I think at the time, kinda. It was sort of...
Good.
Good. So he had a lot of illegitimate children, and he really, really wanted to marry this woman called Jean Armour. And her parents...
Good name.
Yeah, it's a good name, isn't it? Her parents wouldn't let him marry her because they were like, you're a fucking scoundrel, mate. No.
I like that they knew it was his flaw and not anyone else's.
Oh, yeah. But she had twins.
Ooh.
And he was like, I really got to make
I'm surprised that they weren't like, well, she's pregnant, you know, you have to marry her.
No, for some reason.
Wow.
No.
Because usually you
I know,
Australians
that's what you think of. But nope, not in this case. So he was like, well, I'm going into debt. I don't have any money. I'm going to go and be a slave driver in Jamaica.
Oh.
And this is where you kind of do not
call.
like Robert Burns anymore. What a fucking dick. Like, he just made this decision where... And he wrote all these poems, like I said, about equality and love amongst creatures and empathy.
Nature. Yeah.
And everyone.
Oh.
Yeah, and he's really well known as a political person who sees all, you know, that French Revolution sort of, you know, fraternity, egality,
As long as you're white.
etc. As long as you're white, exactly. So I think we see a bit of a side to Burns there where he's a bit of a contradiction. Like, he'll say one thing,
but so many people of that era
way.
were.
For sure.
I mean, the whole concept of slavery was a contradiction because it was all out in the colonies because we didn't want to
look at that.
You know, in the UK, we didn't want to have to see it.
But we want the money, please. Thank you. Yeah. So that's really gross. And I never knew that about Robert Burns because he says that he's going to do this and he signs up for it and he's got his ticket. And just before he goes, he's like, I'm just going to publish these poems and just see if I can make a buck, just to see if I can make a little bit of money to give to Jean before I go or whatever. So he publishes the poems that he's written thus far, which are really like pastoral, like countryside, romantic kind of poems. And they fucking go off. Everyone is like, holy shit, man, you
like
are
when Harry Potter was released.
It's like exactly like that. It's like the Harry Potter of the 18th century. Everyone is just so into Robert Burns all of a sudden.
I never really thought about when he was writing though, and you can see how the where he was publishing was primed for that.
Yeah.
When you've just been stripped of your culture by the English.
They wanted Scottishness. And as we heard in Taya Mouse, I should have said, it's all in Scots, which is, it's a language that's sort of between English and between Gaelic, which is the native language of Scotland. A lot of people still speak Scots today. And you can sort of, if you concentrate, usually as an English speaker, you can understand it. There's a bit of slang that some people might not be familiar with, but it's its own thing. And it must have been so refreshing to see someone writing in Scots at a time when Scottish culture was really under threat and someone creating a bit of a Scottish, not fantasy, but like a cultural touch point. Yeah, romanticizing it and giving some people something to feel proud of in their country at a time when they really needed it. So yeah, people loved it and it just sold like hotcakes. So he thought, well, I'll go to Edinburgh. And I'll see if I can flog this book and write more and get people really into me. So he goes to Edinburgh, which at the time was in the middle of the Enlightenment. Like, it was the Athens of the North. They had people like David Hume and Adam Smith and James Hutton, who basically invented the idea of deep time, which is that, you know, human history goes way beyond Jesus Christ and the Holy Testament.
What
the Holy Testament? What, the Old Testament?
The Old Testament.
The Holy Testament.
Well, you know, it's not far away.
Yeah, so time goes beyond biblical time and way into prehistory, which is was really revolutionary at the time. So Edinburgh is this hotbed of science and medicine and philosophy and all this exciting stuff. And in walks Robert Burns, who's like hailed as, there's this quote, as a heaven-taught ploughman. So this sort of romantic character. And he's really good looking. He's really charming. He's really eloquent because he's super well educated. He's not a heaven-taught ploughman. He's someone who's gone to school and studied really fucking hard. But he's from the working classes. He's a farmer. So he goes around and he sort of cultivates this brand where everyone's wearing like silk stockings and shoes, but he's still in his like super tight pants and his like farming boots. So he's like walking around Edinburgh like this Babin farmer. And everyone just falls in love with him. Like, women love him, men want to be him and probably love him too. So he's found his unique selling proposition, you know. the farming...
The tight pants.
The tight pants.
I'm buying it.
The poet farmer in the tight pants. That's Robert Burns. So yeah, people are really into it. He joins the Freemasons, or he was already in the Freemasons.
Ooh,
so he joins the chapter. I
conspiracies.
know, so many people were in the Freemasons. So he joins the Freemasons in Edinburgh, and they support him, and they get his book. They buy like in bulk copies of his book in all of the different
So
chapters.
he's only successful because of the Freemasons.
Not only that. Excellent.
See, it's all about who you know.
I mean,
Not
it
who
is.
talent.
Excellent branding plus Freemasonry plus tight pants. You're there. So in Edinburgh, he kind of played up to his own stereotype that he'd created for himself. And he writes things like Address to a Haggis, which is one of the main poems that you read on Burns Night. So when you go to cut the haggis in two and spill its guts everywhere, you read Address to a Haggis. And here is my friend Jane reading Address to a Haggis.
Haggis. But mark the rustic haggis fed, the trembling earth resounds his tread. Clap in his whaley neve a blade, we'll make it whistle, and legs and arms and heeds will sned like taps o' thistle. Ye powers a mak mankind your care, and dish them out their billow fair. All Scotland wants nae skinking ware that jops and luggies, but if ye witch your grateful prayer, gie a haggis.
Now, wasn't that lovely?
Oh gosh, that's beautiful.
I love a haggis.
I love the idea of talking to food. I think that's really nice.
It's fab. So yeah, he's having a great time in Edinburgh, but then he realizes that if he's going to be this like ploughman poet, this
Ploughman poet.
farming bard, ooh, I like that. He kind of can't stay in Edinburgh because that ruins the image, doesn't it?
Yeah,
you're a
he's no
city
longer
boy
a farmer.
now. He's no
Yeah.
longer a farmer.
It's tainted.
So he's like, oh shit, I have to go back to Ayrshire. So he does. He goes back home and he marries Jean Armour.
Oh, good.
Which is nice because she's got twins
Yep.
now and she would like some help with that, I guess. And they go and they get a farm and he becomes a farmer again. But it's really hard to make a living as a farmer. There are all these like technological advancements that he's having trouble keeping up with. And I mean, being a farmer is hard in any country, right?
Yeah.
So he's really struggling with that. So he gets one of his friends in Edinburgh, one of his big mates, to help him become an exciseman, which is basically like a tax man guy. I think you go and collect taxes from people who've bought things recently, like goods and services. I don't know. You collect tax. So he becomes like a government employee. So he's going
It's
around.
not really selling the like
It's
farmer.
not. It's not romantic
idea.
at all, is it? It's the opposite. Like an accountant poet, not as sexy at all.
I much prefer ploughman poet.
Me too. But he's got a family to support now.
I'm glad
and
he's finally being responsible.
Finally, yeah.
I mean, supporting any of the other 50 children he created.
I think he is a bit.
Oh, good.
Because he needs to make... there's a letter that I've listened to that he writes to his friend saying, yeah, I have all these babies that need my help now.
Good.
So, yeah, that's great that he's being responsible. But it kind of puts a dampener on him and his political views because, as we discussed at the start, he is quite a political man. But you can't be political when you work for the government, right? Like, you can't have opposing views. Like, he's pro-French Revolution, basically. And he keeps getting drunk and shooting his mouth off in pubs. And the government people who employ him are like, Robbie. So that's going on. But he's still sort of keeping his creative, mojo on. And he writes some really fantastic poems in this period of his life when he's back in Ayrshire. So he writes, do you know Tam O'Shanter?
Yeah, I've heard of that one.
It's so good. It's my fave. It's like the perfect Halloween poem. It's wonderful. It's about this guy who's at the pub getting really drunk, and he has to get back home, but it's this really wild night outside. It's like a huge storm, and he has to ride by Alloway's haunted kirk. Ooh. So he's on his horse and he's riding by, and he sees that the church is all lit up. So he goes up to it, and he sees that there's all these witches dancing in the church. Just leave, Tam.
God.
Exactly. But Tam doesn't leave. He's like hypnotized, and there's this one witch who's particularly Babin. And her top comes off, like her like
You can tell this poem was written by a man.
Oh, yeah, and by Robert Burns in particular. So she's got a really low-cut top, and he yells out, like, yeah, tiny top, basically. And all the witches are like, oh, you're there. And they, like, chase him over the bridge back home.
So it's just an early example of women attacking men for catcalling.
Yeah, exactly, Claire. Thank you. It's a good lesson. It's like a moral tale.
Yeah.
So here's my friend Jane reading a little bit of Tam O'Shanter for you, just the beginning.
When Chapman Billies leave the street and Ruthie Nevers meet, as market days are wearing late and folk begin to tack the gate, whilst we sit boozing at the nappy and getting foo and unco happy, we think now on the lang Scot smiles, the mosses, watters, slaps and styles that lie between us and our hame, where sulks our sulky sullen dame, gathering her brows like gathering storm, nursing her wrath to keep it warm.
All right. In this time, just before he died, he wrote A Man's a Man for All That, which actually has another name, Is There for Honest Poverty. So that's one of his most famous poems, sort of about the equality of all men, he says.
I've never heard of that one, which might be why I don't really think of him as being political.
It's the one that goes, for all that and all that, a man's a man for all that. Do you know?
No.
Anyway.
I mean, I'm not hugely familiar with his work,
So we're sort of reaching the end of his life. He, in order to try and prove that he was really loyal government man, because it was all getting a little bit sus, he buys this really expensive uniform to join the local vigilante group. So apparently all over the UK, people were making these little vigilante groups just in case France invaded or something. Like, they were really worried about that. So we're in like 1796 right now. So he buys this really expensive uniform and goes into a lot of debt because it's really, really pricey. And then he gets sick. So when you got sick back then and you were a government worker...
There was no NHS.
There was no NHS. So he went to half pay, which meant that he couldn't pay back the debt of the uniform. So he was getting poorer and poorer and sicker and sicker. They're not completely sure what ended up killing him. They think it was some sort of congenital heart condition.
Was it syphilis?
I mean, it should have been syphilis, Claire, but I don't think it was in this instance. I don't know. Anyway, so he passed away in his house in Ayrshire.
How old was he?
He was not very old. He was like 48.
Oh.
No, younger, sorry, 37.
Wow.
1759 to 1796. Young.
Maths.
He did not live a long time. But he gave us a lot of amazing poems, and his friends, after he died, started celebrating Burns Night, which is a night that I love and you will love.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it.
I'm really looking forward to it too.
It sounds like a great way to celebrate like a cultural icon and like a really beautiful part of Scottish culture, and especially considering it was something that people were so drawn to because
he was rebuilding
the decimation of
that.
culture.
Yeah, exactly.
That it's continued to be honoured is really cool.
And whether or not you agree with that interpretation of Scottishness, he writes a great poem, and they're, if nothing else, they are very fun. So that is Robert Burns and Burns Night.
Excellent, thank you.
My pleasure, Claire. So if you want to hear more history tidbits, you can find us wherever you listen to podcasts. Please rate, review and subscribe so other history buffs can find us too. If you want to know what sources we used, i.e. if you want to find the Wikipedia page for Hadrian's Wall, or the documentary about Robert Burns, please go to our SoundCloud page. The link is in the description. Today's homework, everyone, is to read a poem by Rabbi Burns. Anyone you like. They're all fun. Or if you can't be bothered, just drink some whiskey. Cheers. Cheers. Thanks, guys.